Now, 92% of B2B buyers now prefer virtual sales interactions over in-person meetings. Look, we're moving faster. We got AI completely compressing things for us. The amount of work that we can do now versus 10 years ago is completely different. So executives, decision makers, small business owners are no stranger to that. They've got to be just as efficient to move with the market and get the ROI out of the virtual benefits that we have in place for us.
Great experiences build great leaders. Great leaders build great teams. This is Building Great Sales Teams.
All right, guys, welcome back to Building Great Sales Teams. I've got an episode for you guys today around virtual sales systems. Now, if you don't know, about 80% of B2B sales happen virtually, whether it's via email, via Zoom call, or over the phone, right? So where all virtually really is not in person. And so because of this trend, I wanted to make sure I did an episode like this, and I called it virtual sales systems versus virtual sales, or getting more virtual sales or better virtual sales, because this is going to be an outline of systems that you can put in place for your team to start selling virtually, right? And so we're going to explore some of the concepts. We're going to explore some of the statistics behind that and make sure that you guys are fully prepared to go virtual should you need to. Now, the first stat that I threw at you was 80% of B2B sales. The next stat that I'm going to throw at you is home service sales. Now, we would think because the trust is built in the home that not a lot of these are going to be sold virtually, but the trend is moving towards that. 55% of all home service searches start online. And so it's natural for it to progress if you catch it properly to continue online and even complete online. Should it not be something that needed specific measurements or you to be in the home in order to quote it, right? So there's plenty of home services that can start online, continue online, and at minimum, the appointment can be booked online. But to get to that point, we've got to have some systems in place. And so we need to be able to shift to virtual sales if it's necessary. Now, 92% of B2B buyers now prefer virtual sales interactions over in-person meetings. Look, we're moving faster. We got AI completely compressing things for us. The amount of work that we can do now versus 10 years ago is completely different. So executives, decision makers, small business owners are no stranger to that. They've got to be just as efficient to move with the market and get the ROI out of the virtual benefits that we have in place for us. All right, so some of the best practices that we're going to go over around virtual sales is the pre-meeting prep, okay? And so this is a big one for me right now. Whenever I jump on a sales-centric call, probably about 5 minutes before that call, I'll go to my calendar and I'll look in the notes, the meeting notes on the calendar. And this is just specifically for my side of the invite. And my admin will have already put in some background about the company of the person that I'm talking to, some background about the person that I'm talking to, pulling that from social media, as well as she'll have dropped that information into ChatGPT, which has a prompt in order to prepare me for that sales call. So it will be typically maybe some mutual things around building rapport, some things that I noticed that the company could benefit from whatever product or service that I'm selling. And so that's some of the pre-meeting prep. And whenever you hop on the call, you want to immediately let them know that you've done your research. And one of the easiest ways to do that, if you don't have time for this pre-meeting prep, is to simply go to their social media, see what their last few posts were, if they post consistently. And remember, some people post on LinkedIn, some people post on Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok. So make sure that you find where they like to post and check that out, and then reference something that they've just posted about. It's one of the easiest ways to bring down the wall, build the rapport, and get them talking about themselves. Like everything else in sales, as Zig Ziglar says, once you get that know, like, and trust factor going, You get people talking about themselves, you gain their trust, they'll like you more, you'll get the sale, right? And so whether it's a complicated process like mine that preps me for the call and I have a team that's delivering that, or whether it's just you simply taking a few minutes before the call to get to know that person a little bit via social media, that can give you the edge going into the call. Now, during the meeting, roughly 55% of communication is via body language, right? This is Arabian's rule. So keep your camera on, use an engaged posture, and mirror to establish rapport. Okay. And so let's kind of go wide with that. Obviously, we want our camera on. If they have trouble getting their camera on, or if this is maybe like a consumer and they're not used to being on Zoom or whatever the case is, you can't make a big deal if they aren't able to get their camera on. Now, obviously, if that's part of your sales process in terms of qualifying the customer, they have to show you something in the home or something like that. That can be a little more difficult, but you have to go with the flow. You have to be able to adapt from an on-screen customer that can share their screen and knows what to do in Zoom to a customer that barely got on the phone. I had one the other day want to pivot completely to the phone. So what I did when he pivoted to the phone is I went ahead and texted him what I would normally show him on screen on a Zoom call. So I went ahead and texted him that about 5 minutes before our conversation. And so he was able to review those things and know what I was talking about, and then actually pull them up on our phone call because he had me on speakerphone. He was able to pull them up and visually see them. That's one of the biggest advantages with a virtual call is control of the customer's eye line, right? So if they're looking at the screen or looking at the camera or looking at the laptop, then you have control of what they see and the way that they see it, which is interesting, and which is why we should keep our presentations and our slides very simple and to the point. So we have control of what their brain is processing at any given time. Because a lot of times you hand someone a brochure and they'll be flipping through the benefits section when you're trying to tell them the features, or they'll be flipping through the technical specifications when you're trying to talk to them about the way that this product is going to improve their life. So that's one of the biggest advantages in my mind of virtual sales. Okay. So the next piece that I want to go over, when we talk about body language, what a lot of people do, and the problem that they have, and if you're watching this on YouTube, you're going to get to see this, but they will be up here in the camera as a salesperson instead of back here in a nice, relaxed setting. It's the same way as it is at the door. You don't want to overwhelm them. You don't want to overwhelm them in the screen either. Some of them, it may just be on their phone, so it's your big old face all over their phone. So make sure you see how my screen is framed very nicely here. If I wanted to do middle thirds, I could. You know what I mean? And what a middle third is, it's the middle of the screen about phone size, right? So even if I was on the middle of the screen about phone size, you would still be able to see my face, still be able to see my body language and everything that I'm doing. Now, one of the things I would not recommend is a background like mine, right? The background like mine that I have right now is specifically for the podcast. It's for sales trainings. It's to narrow in the viewer's focus on me and what I'm talking about. Now, your background should be very soft, very non-intimidating, And so one of the things that I'm doing here soon is I'm switching to the office next door, and I'm going to set up my working office there. This will just be for podcasting, and I'll actually probably rent out the studio. I'll have some chairs in here, and the way that I do it, it'll be a much nicer setup for a podcast. But in my other office, I'm going to have a bookshelf set up. I'm going to have some awards in the background. I'm going to have pictures of my family and stuff like that. You want to make sure that they know you're a real human being jumping on a call with them, whether it's B2B or D2C. Okay. So in terms of what's in the background and what's around, same principle. When you're in person, you want to appear organized. You want to appear professional. You want to appear put together, right? Same situation with your background. You don't want this to be the background at your house with your couch in the background or your kids playing or basically anything that would distract the person from the subject that you're actually talking about or making a genuine connection with you. It is so much harder to make a connection over a virtual medium than anything else. So you want to make sure that you're able to keep everything focused, right? And so much of what I'm talking about, you will have to put your salespeople through training when they come into the company. So on those first 3 points, right? When we talk about the buyer mindset changing, right? Because so many people, this is interesting too, because I just went over this with somebody the other day. So many people have a hard time putting themselves in the shoe of their buyer. They think because they don't like something that their buyer won't like something. And that's not how it works. You are not your buyer. I'll say it again. You are not your buyer. You need data to tell you what your buyer likes. You need feedback from your sales team to tell you what your buyer likes. You need other industries that your buyer buys from telling you what your buyers like versus you assuming as much because you don't like something. Okay, so going into the shift to virtual sales, best practices for virtual sales meetings, and then building rapport. So this is a big one. Most buyers like salespeople who listen more than they talk. And when we're on a virtual screen, there's a lot of pressure to be talking, to be presenting all the time. And so, but when you're in person, it's more pressure on the customer to walk you into their home, to talk to you about, what they want to like. The ball is more in their court. So it's easier in an in-person presentation to really build rapport and listen more than you talk. Versus a virtual one, you're performing, right? You're on stage essentially, and they're kind of sitting back. There's nothing around them in order to build that rapport. So you're going to have to pull it out of them, right? And so you always want to ask open-ended questions. You always want to, just like you would in an in-person, you want to frame it as, hey, I've got 3 kids, 10 to 14. We're in that season right now. We're doing all of the things. What about you? And so you always want to personalize the wins as well. So 80% of buyers are more likely to purchase when brands offer a personalized experience, right? Use tailored stories and case studies to bring this in. What I always like to do is to talk about the customer I just signed up, or John, who I signed up last week, but I related to them. John, who has a family of 5, just like you, who I signed up last week, or Joe, who has a roofing business just like yours that enrolled in my sales program, And so I'm always going to have to build rapport through stories, and that type of conversation is going to be a lot harder because most of the time they're not going to have a lot around them that I can kind of pull from, right? This is where that meeting prep comes in big time. Because if you were able to pull some stuff from the social media and able to know a little bit about them before you go into that conversation, this is more in the B2B space than the B2C, you're going to be able to build rapport in a lot more genuine and stronger way, right? All right, the next piece is the actual tools, okay? And so I've gone into a whole episode on selling tools. So if you want to go deeper on these, I would definitely go into that episode. But one of the things that I want to make sure that you get on point, especially when you're running back-to-back meetings, is make sure your calendar is on point. That's going to be huge in this. Make sure that you always put 5-minute buffers in between calls. And you can do that through one of the most universal and well-used software is called Calendly. And in the Calendly settings, or your Google Calendar, or your iCalendar, or your Exchange Calendar, whatever calendar you have, you can go in and put buffers, a minimum buffer in between each call. With Calendly, you're actually structuring the calls, right? So one of the first things I would always set up is a discovery call. And then if you have like a 2-call close, then you have that second call, you label that differently, right? A call I would set up is a connection call, right? So if you're just connecting with a potential referral partner, that's another call that you can put together as a referral partner call, a walkthrough call. Basically, I would have 3 to 5 custom links that go to anywhere from 15 to 45-minute appointments, just depending on what I needed to conduct from that connection, right? And so what these do is it kind of minimizes the back and forth of, are you available tomorrow at 2:00, or you basically just drop them a link. And one of the things I want to make sure I do whenever I drop that link is always offer to get their link first and schedule myself on their calendar. And that is very much an etiquette thing, right? It's like, if I reach out to you, let's say I'm cold messaging you on LinkedIn or something like that. If I reach out to you, I don't want to make you work, right? I want to work to get on your calendar once that's something that you're interested in, right? And so basically, I'm going to say something to the tune of, hey, John, sounds good. Why don't we hop on a call and talk more about this? Do Do you have a scheduling link you can drop here, or would you prefer mine? And what that does is it gives them the option. It's a 2-option close, right? In both options, they schedule a time with me or I schedule a time with them. And so that's an etiquette that I like to follow through with. So anyways, going back to Calendly, make sure you are customizing everything. Make sure that your face, your picture, your portrait, however you want to set it up, your logo, your color scheme, that it is all prevalent throughout your sales process. So whether you're posting on social media and then you're going to a Calendly link and then you're going to your Zoom avatar and then your email picture, make sure it's consistent throughout. Consumers want to see consistency and stability, and that says to them that they're going to get a consistent and stable service. And so make sure that you are incorporating those colors, similar pictures, and branding throughout your sales process, right? All right, the next piece that you're going to want to make sure that you have in place is a CRM. So being that if you sell virtually, you need a high amount of appointments in order to convert, because in person is the go in terms of conversion rate. You will always convert more in person than you will virtual. So virtual, you're going to have to set more appointments. And so many people say, well, I want to do virtual because I don't have the drive time. And I completely understand that. But what you are going to have is a lower closing rate. And so you're just kind of exchanging one for the other with the drive time, right? And so once you have been selling virtual for a while, you can become more efficient. And then virtual, in my mind, long-term will win out. And it also depends on the product, right? If I'm selling a construction product, it's very hard to sell virtually. But if I'm selling a home service product that is a standard install or standard service, then that's very easy to sell virtually. Okay, so we've got the Calendly set up. We're linking them. We're setting up an appointment. All of this should be tracked and fed into a CRM. I've talked about CRMs ad nauseum, so I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but I will say that it's pretty common, even in-person salespeople, to forget to follow up. So make sure your CRM has a follow-up sequence and that it is constantly tasking you to follow up with customers according to a sales process that you've put together. Okay. So the CRM is the next thing you're going to need. All right. So we can take it to the next level here. Once you start getting a few sales and you can start investing in your technology, one of the other things I'm going to recommend you invest in is Fathom. Okay. Not these other note takers. To me, Fathom is the GOAT. I've been using Fathom for 2 years now. I'm a top 1% user of Fathom. I do not have a referral link for you guys. You know what? I will. I'll drop the referral link in the notes here. May as well maybe get a free month of Fathom or something like that. But this note taker, once you go into the actual video, one, it records the video. It's not just a note taker. It records the video and then it will do an AI summary for you. But then you can customize the summaries. You can go in and it can give you a sales summary. It can give you a project update summary. It can give you a one-to-one coaching summary. And so it gives you custom summaries. Obviously, it's going to email the individual, notes from the call as well. But what I really do with this is I take those transcripts because it transcribes the whole meeting. I take those transcripts and I drop them in the ChatGPT. And for these 2 call closes, or maybe for the longer sales cycle that I need notes over time to understand what I've been through with my prospect and how I'm going to close them, I'm going to keep a specific chat for them. I'm going to drop the transcription into those chats and then ask it to give me the task from them, give me the finer points, give me the follow-up sequence that I should be following with this consumer or the next steps, right? And so a lot of times when you have that history, you can create basically a little coach within ChatGPT to remind you of what was important to this buyer and make sure to bring it up on the next call, as well as what you should have accomplished or what you agreed to. That's another big one, right? Having that note taker will let you know what you agreed to on that call. And as far as I've seen, Fathom is one of the most universal and consistent note takers out there that does video and transcription and is going to create a great experience for your user. It gives you a lot of stats too. If you struggle with talking too much and not listening enough, in the call, Fathom will prompt you like, hey, you're on a monologue. Hey, your talk time right now is 60 something percent. And so you always want to aim for the low 40% when it comes to talk time. Let the consumer talk more than you do. If possible, you want to draw that out of them. All right. So the next piece that we're going to talk about is the presentation tools. Okay. To me, Canva is undoubtedly the GOAT right now in terms of, what is that word? User-friendly. It is the most user-friendly one. You go get a template. I would keep your presentations to no more than 5 slides. You got an intro slide, you got a conclusion slide, right? And 3 slides in between, right? The first slide is building rapport, credibility, awards, nods, all that good stuff in the first slide. The second slide is your good, better, best packages, right? And then the fourth slide is next steps, warranty information, if any. And then the 5th slide is just a placeholder, right? You always want the placeholders there, because if you're happen to start presenting rather than stop sharing and resharing, you have the placeholders there in the beginning of the conversation when you're building rapport and you're qualifying the customer. And then the end of the conversation where you're handling objections, right? And they're not as distracted by your next steps or your warranty slide, right? Or you can just stop sharing altogether. Now, what I will say with virtual sales is over time, you will get very good, very, very good at the virtual sale. You get very, very good at your presentation. And eventually, you won't need it at all. I know this is hard to believe, but eventually you will not need that slide deck. But I would start with it 100%. So when it comes to building virtual sales systems, I would make sure that you build that for your team, and then you graduate them to a no deck sale. This is especially true in B2B sales. And honestly, the no deck sale is only possible when you have a lot of case studies, a lot of successful customers that you can reference, right? So when you do share your screen, you're referencing deliverables. When you do share your screen, you're referencing before and after photos. When you do share your screen, you're sharing something specific and custom to that customer because they said it was important to them. Now, when you have a presentation like that, the customer knows they're going through a custom process that you only pulled it up because they brought it up type deal. Now the customer knows that you are truly there for them and are giving them a custom solution, even if it's the templated good, better, best solution that you give everybody. You have structured it and presented it in such a way that is custom to them. Okay. So that's everything on the virtual presentation. Eventually you need to graduate to not having one and just referencing key deliverables visually, right? All right. So what are some of the common challenges we're going to have from virtual sales? Disengagement is going to be number one. Disengagement. 70% of sales meetings fail to lack of engagement. That's from Forrester.com. Okay, so why do they have lack of engagement? We're going to go right back to what you've heard over and over again. They have lack of engagement because you're not talking about what's important to them. How do we talk about what's important to them? Well, we have to ask very good questions to understand what's important to them. And then we have to take what's important to them and lace it in between our features and benefits of our products. Okay. That is how you combat disengagement. Now, 41% of sales presentations, tech issues cost them deals. Now, first of all, if you're a salesperson and you sell virtually and you're going to blame it on tech issues, then it's just a cop out. It really is. Because like I said in the beginning of this podcast, you have to be able to pivot. So if the customer's having, or prospect is having technical issues, you got to be able to pivot to a non-video Zoom call. And if they're still having technical issues, you got to be able to pivot to a phone call. And if they're still having technical issues, at some point you got to pivot to an in-person meeting if it's not too far away from your main office, right? And so make sure, and then if the technical issues are on your end, oh man, you may as well just walk away from that deal because they're not going to have any faith that you're competent enough to where you asked them on this call and you couldn't facilitate the call, that you're competent enough to deliver them the product solution and answer that they really need. I want to kind of share my success in virtual selling with you. and help you understand, to me, what the ultimate sales process is when it comes to virtual selling. Okay. So in the beginning, a lot of my sales came from people I already knew. So that doesn't really count to me. Now, the ideal situation for your virtual sales to have a high conversion rate, because I was, for consulting, I was converting at like 90% last year. And I can show you the numbers on that. I was converting at 90% because by the time they got to me, a few key things had happened that you can facilitate, even if you're cold calling these people, right? A few key things had happened. The first one that would be the trifecta in reverse, essentially. The first one would be that they met me in person, or they saw me at an event in person, or we connected at an event in person. The second one would be that they followed me on social media, right? And the third one would be that they listened to one of my podcast episodes, or consumed one of my free courses, or consumed long form content, you know? And so in order for this trifecta to happen, you have to be out networking. In order for this trifecta to happen, you have to be posting on social media. And in order for this trifecta to happen, you have to have some type of value to give the person on the other end, right? Especially in B2B sales, especially in high ticket sales. If you're hitting that trifecta, you are in great shape. But you can do this in home service sales too. You can 100% do this in home service sales too. It just may be at a home show, or it may be at some type of networking event, or it may be that you subtly network really well in social situations, whether it be at a bar, at a restaurant, at a concert, at an event, at a state fair, whatever the case is. You're very good at dropping what you do, and then maybe even dropping the business card or dropping the follow on Instagram, whatever the case is. And now they are in your pipeline, whether it just be as a follower or as an interested prospect, right? And so the final takeaways that I have for this episode, and I'll walk through them real quick for you guys just to make sure you caught them all, is that the world is moving to virtual selling. B2B is at 80% virtual selling. And one of the interesting stats that I looked up too was that right now the virtual selling market in home services specifically is 4.7 billion. By 2030, that home selling market will be at 16.7 billion. So it's going to quadruple in the next 5 years. It's going to quadruple. So understand, and you guys know this in general, but home services has always been able to get away with a certain amount of, I only do in person, person-to-person interaction, right? If you have not built out your online branding, if you have not built out your website, if you do not have a fluid process from SEO all the way to appointment set, or even sale made virtually, then you need to go ahead and build that out and put that in place for your team, or else you're going to be handicapping them, only allowing them to sell in person. Okay. Now understand that even in the construction space, you can make remodel sales virtually. You can make cabinet sales virtually. Now, here's the difference is making the sale, at least the first sale, is a design fee versus a full quote, right? Because we know that somebody needs to go out in person and do that. But oftentimes the person that can go out and quote the project properly is not the person that can make the sale, right? When you have the hybrid in between, this is why, you know a contractor, but you don't know a nationwide contract company, right? Oftentimes. And if there is a nationwide contract company, it's typically, we do windows, or we do solar, or we do roofs. It's a very simple product that they know they can quote based on square footage, or they can quote based on how many you need. And so, the closer you can get to that complete sale virtually, you're going to be able to pivot to that when you need to and make more sales because of it, and make those sales faster once you get experienced enough at it, right? All right. So takeaway, we're moving to virtual sales. The next one is prep for your meetings. Make sure all the things we talked about in your background, make sure it looks good. Make sure that you're framed properly and that you're not consuming the screen. Make sure that you're building rapport using your prep. as well as asking open-ended questions before you get into all the conversation and everything. Make sure you're asking really good questions. Make sure you have the right tools in place to not only schedule the meeting, the sales conversation, but also follow up on the sales conversation. Make sure technology does not end up sinking your sales ship. And then make sure you keep that prospect engaged by talking about them and not yourself and your company, right? The last part is I walked you guys through kind of the real world examples of having a 90% conversion rate, the real world example of being able to leave the presentation deck and sell virtually face to face more than sharing your screen. That's going to be an important piece of this. And so start building out these systems. One of the easiest ways to do that is what I call a sales flow, right? And so the sales flow is all the way from the prospecting activity to scheduling the appointment to prepping the customer for the appointment. Like these are all little sections, little SOPs that build to the big SOP, which is the sales process. And so when you take the time to work on the business and build out that sales process and that sales flow and what it looks like virtually, and if that process can pivot to in person, you start creating what I call a sales flow, but you're eventually going to call a money map. And you're going to see the holes in the money map and in the conversion rates between the process. And this is where it gets really sexy and I start nerding out, is when you build that out and you start being able to call your shot and say, okay, we're converting from prospecting to appointment at this rate. How do we reinforce that and increase that with some CRM magic, a little prepping the customer, a little getting rid of the objections before the salesperson even gets on the call. And then once we convert, we're maybe losing 10% of customers through cancels because we sold so good. They forgot they didn't have money for this, whatever the case was, right? And how do we decrease that cancel rate? How do we prepare the customer? How do we offer financing, so on and so forth? It just gets really nerdy, really fast. And that, again, that's you working on the business set in it. You got to take the time to build this out. Build out that virtual sales system for your team. All right, guys, it's been a great episode with you guys. As always, if you got value from this episode, please share, please review. The reviews are what actually puts us on the top of the list when somebody searches for sales training or building sales teams. The reviews put us higher on that SEO podcast list. Guys, if you are interested in consulting for your company, you can reach out to me directly via Facebook, Instagram, or shoot me an email at doug@salesprogrambuilder.com. Or, as you guys know, my main gig now is with Check Sammy. If you are a home service company and you want to get add-on sales through power washing, through bulk junk, through e-waste, through recycling, through all the mediums that we have at Check Sammy in order to add on the sales to customers, you can do that through us, through our partner program. Again, just reach out to me, let me know you're interested in that, and we'll hop on a call and I'll walk you through it all. As always, let's get building.